What happens when a person is judged solely on their appearance? In a luxury car dealership, a plain-dressed black customer is treated with disdain. Will he ignore it or fight back? Watch as a black man stands up to racism in a way that will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories. The doors of Platinum Motors slid open with a soft, reassuring hum, revealing a world of polished chrome, rich leather, and the quiet hum of luxury. Located in the heart of New York's most exclusive district, Platinum Motors was a testament to wealth and opulence. The showroom sparkled under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, with the gentle melody of jazz floating through the air. Every inch of the space had been meticulously designed to evoke a sense of grandeur and exclusivity. Cars worth millions of dollars sat on display, each one more magnificent than the last. Marcus Davis, the CEO of this empire, stood at the entrance of the showroom, unnoticed by the staff bustling around. Unlike the sleek suits, sharp ties, and polished shoes typically seen in this environment, Marcus was dressed simply. A soft gray polo shirt, dark jeans, and scuffed sneakers, nothing that screamed wealth or success. He'd specifically chosen this attire for the day, intending to test the very system he had built. With his hands casually stuffed in his pockets, Marcus wandered through the showroom, taking in the view. The cars were stunning, sleek, aerodynamic machines that exuded power and elegance. His eyes skimmed over the array of luxury vehicles, but it wasn't the cars that held his attention now. He was more focused on the staff. The young salesman closest to him was busy talking to a well-dressed couple, nodding politely and laughing at their jokes. The man's tailored suit and pristine shoes caught more than a glance from the staff, their attention shifting entirely to him. Marcus continued to stand there unnoticed for what felt like an eternity. No one approached him, no one even glanced in his direction. His presence, despite being right in the middle of the showroom, seemed to be invisible. He leaned against a sleek silver sports car, the cool metal of the car contrasting with the heat building in his chest. His grip on the edge of the vehicle tightened as he observed the scene around him. The showroom, a place designed to attract the richest and most powerful, was silent in its disregard for anyone who didn't fit that mold. Marcus exhaled slowly, taking a moment to soak in the irony of the situation. He was the CEO of this very company, yet here he was, treated like he didn't belong. The luxury, the ambience, all seemed hollow now, an empty shell of what he had built. Marcus stood in the middle of Platinum Motors' showroom, trying to blend in with the luxurious environment. He watched as salespeople hurried to assist well-dressed customers, offering them glasses of champagne and ushering them toward high-end cars. The attention was immediate and effusive for those who looked the part, the kind of attention he had grown accustomed to. But for Marcus, this was different. He was just another customer now, dressed casually, and the indifference he felt from the staff was glaring. David Thompson, one of the younger salesmen, glanced in Marcus' direction for a brief moment, his eyes flicking over Marcus' simple polo and jeans. There was no sign of recognition in his gaze, nothing to suggest that Marcus was anything more than a passerby. Instead of offering help, David turned his attention back to the couple standing nearby, both of them sharply dressed, laughing at something he had just said. The way he leaned forward, eager to please, was a stark contrast to the dismissive glance he had given Marcus. Marcus exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled breath. He'd been standing there for over 15 minutes now. 15 minutes in a showroom where customers were meant to feel like royalty, yet not one person had approached him. His eyes darted to the staff, who were all busy helping others. A well-dressed man in a sharp suit was being shown a brand-new luxury sedan, the salesman's voice pitched perfectly to flatter and sell, each word carefully chosen to make the customer feel important. Another couple was led to a corner where the latest sports car sat, and the salesperson all but bowed as they handed over the brochure with a flourish. Meanwhile, Marcus remained alone by the silver sports car, watching as every staff member ignored him. A sense of frustration slowly began to rise in his chest. It wasn't just about being overlooked, it was about being dismissed, as if he didn't belong here. The showroom was supposed to be a place where everyone was treated equally, a place where luxury was not only about the cars but about the experience. But what Marcus saw in front of him was a show of privilege, a performance where those who appeared wealthy were given the red carpet treatment, while others were left waiting in the shadows. It was subtle, yet unmistakable, the look of judgment from the staff, the decision to treat him differently because he didn't fit the image of the typical Platinum Motors customer. He was being reduced to nothing more than an invisible figure in the background. The longer he stood there, the more the feeling of being disregarded settled in. The moment was turning from uncomfortable to unbearable, and Marcus could feel the sting of it. He was used to being respected, to having doors opened for him, both literally and figuratively. Yet here he was, in his own showroom, standing unnoticed like an outsider. It wasn't just a personal slight, it was a sign of something deeper. The employees weren't just ignoring him, they were treating him as if he didn't deserve to be here, simply because he wasn't wearing a $1,000 suit or driving up in a luxury car. He watched the young salesman, David, now laughing and nodding with the couple. The customer was clearly enjoying the attention, relishing in the special treatment. Marcus couldn't help but feel the contrast between the way he was being treated and the way this man was being served. He didn't belong here, at least, not in their eyes. The realization hit him hard, but it also triggered something else inside him, a desire to see just how deep the problem ran. A part of him wanted to walk away, to leave and forget about it. But another, stronger part, urged him to stay and test the staff, to see if their treatment of customers would change when they assumed they were dealing with someone worthy of their time. He stood up straighter, tilting his head slightly as he surveyed the room, his gaze moving from the staff to the customers and back again. Marcus knew this was a rare opportunity, an opportunity to test the system that he had built, to see just how much the superficial judgments of wealth played a role in the company's success. Marcus made up his mind. He wasn't going anywhere. He would wait. And if no one came to help him, he would take it further. He was determined to expose the way his employees treated customers based on appearance, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to remind them who he was and what he stood for. As he stood there, arms crossed over his chest, the minutes ticked by slowly. He could hear the soft chatter of sales pitches, the clink of glasses, and the sound of shoes clicking on marble floors, but none of it was directed at him. He wasn't the focus of their attention. A sense of resolve settled over Marcus. He was going to make them see him, not as a casual customer, but as the man who built this empire. Marcus stood in the middle of the showroom, his gaze sweeping over the luxury cars that filled the space, their polished surfaces gleaming under the soft lighting. Yet, despite the grandeur surrounding him, he felt utterly invisible. Every other person in the showroom seemed to command attention, except for him. He watched as salespeople flitted from one well-dressed customer to the next, offering them champagne and personal tours of the most expensive models, but no one spared a second glance at him. The realization hit him hard. It wasn't just that they were ignoring him. It was the certainty that, to them, he simply didn't matter. His casual attire, his simple polo and jeans, had already told them everything they needed to know. He wasn't one of the important customers, the ones who fit the mold of wealth and power that Platinum Motors was accustomed to serving. Despite owning this empire, despite being the one who built it from the ground up, here he was, left standing alone. Marcus had been waiting for 20 minutes now, watching as his staff tended to customers who looked the part. His frustration was starting to build, turning into something more than just mild annoyance. It was anger, a growing sense of injustice. He had walked into his own showroom, expecting to be treated like any other customer, but instead he was treated like he didn't belong. Finally, he made up his mind. He was done waiting. If they weren't going to approach him, then he would approach them. With a slow, deliberate step, Marcus walked toward the reception desk where a young receptionist was absorbed in her computer screen, her fingers clicking rapidly as she typed away. Her eyes didn't flicker up when he approached. He stood there for a moment, watching her work, waiting for her to acknowledge his presence, but she didn't. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice firm but polite, trying not to show the frustration building inside him. The receptionist barely spared him a glance, continuing her work. "Sales reps are busy," she replied flatly, her tone unbothered. "You can wait outside if you're just browsing." The dismissive tone stung more than Marcus had anticipated. Her complete lack of attention, her assumption that he wasn't a serious customer, was like a slap in the face. He had come in expecting to be treated with at least some level of respect, but instead he was met with cold indifference. He tried to stay calm, but it was getting harder with each passing second. "Outside?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of disbelief. "I thought this was the showroom." She looked at him for just a moment, eyes scanning him briefly before her gaze returned to the screen. "Yes, but we try to keep the showroom clear for serious buyers. If you're just looking, I suggest you wait outside. We can schedule an appointment if you're here to buy." Marcus felt the words settle in his chest like a heavy weight. He had been treated like this before, but never so openly, so blatantly. He was used to being judged by his appearance, but this was different. She hadn't even asked him why he was there. She had simply assumed he didn't belong. The thought made his blood run a little hotter. Before he could respond, another voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus turned to find David Thompson, the older salesman, walking toward him. David's eyes quickly scanned Marcus from head to toe, lingering on his simple attire, before shifting his attention to the couple standing near a luxury SUV. The couple, dressed in the latest designer clothes, were receiving the full VIP treatment, complete with smiles and champagne. David's gaze briefly flicked back to Marcus, a faint smirk on his lips. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone overly polite but with an undercurrent of condescension. Marcus stepped forward, trying to maintain his composure. "I was hoping to get some assistance." David glanced at the receptionist, then back at Marcus. The flicker of recognition was there, but it was quickly masked by his practiced professionalism. "Well, sir," David began, his voice laced with subtle judgment, "this dealership caters to a very specific clientele, people who know what they're looking for, people who understand luxury." Marcus could feel the weight of David's words pressing down on him. It wasn't just a dismissal. It was a blatant attempt to reinforce the class divide. Marcus didn't fit their definition of a luxury customer, so he was unworthy of attention. David continued, "If you're just looking, we do have a pre-owned section a few miles down the road. It's a little more accessible." The word accessible hit Marcus like a physical blow. It was a veiled insult, a suggestion that he didn't belong in the showroom with the expensive cars. The pre-owned section was where people like him, those who didn't look the part, were sent. He stood there, fuming silently, feeling the sting of being judged so casually. "So, you're saying I should go to the used car lot?" Marcus asked, his voice colder now, more controlled. "Just because I don't look the part." David's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "It's not about looking the part, sir. It's about finding the right fit." Marcus couldn't hold back his frustration any longer. "It's about who you think deserves your time, isn't it?" he said, his voice steady but firm. "You've already decided that I'm not worth your time because of what I'm wearing, haven't you?" David shifted uneasily, realizing too late that he had gone too far. He didn't know how to respond, but Marcus wasn't waiting for an apology. The damage had already been done. Marcus turned away from David, his chest tightening with indignation. He had been calm for too long. This wasn't just about him. It was about what the dealership represented, about how people like him were often overlooked and dismissed because they didn't meet certain superficial standards. As he stood there, watching the salespeople cater to customers they deemed worthy, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going to let this go. He had worked too hard to build this company, and he wasn't going to let his own staff treat him, or anyone else, like this. The time for silence was over. It was time to confront the issue head-on. Marcus stood motionless for a moment, the sting of David's words still fresh in his mind. His jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. The anger and frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface now felt like a fire waiting to be unleashed. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about sending a message. He wasn't going to let this go. With a steady hand, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice before a deep, calm voice answered on the other end. "I need you here now," Marcus said simply. Without waiting for a response, he ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The showroom felt even colder now, as if the air itself had thickened with tension. Marcus glanced around, noticing how the staff continued to avoid eye contact with him. Their attention was still on the well-dressed customer in the corner, who was sipping champagne with a smile. A sleek, black Mercedes Maybach S680 pulled up outside the showroom, the hum of the engine cutting through the silence like a knife. The valet quickly rushed to open the door as a man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped out. He exuded an air of authority, his crisp white shirt and navy tie perfectly complementing the luxury of the car. Jordan Wells, the regional manager, made his way toward the showroom entrance with purpose. His confident stride turned heads as he walked through the glass doors. But instead of greeting the VIP customer everyone had been fawning over, Jordan bypassed the group entirely and walked directly toward Marcus, a respectful smile on his face. "Marcus," Jordan greeted, his tone warm and professional. "I apologize for the delay. It's good to see you." The staff froze, eyes darting from Jordan to Marcus, a dawning realization spreading across their faces. David Thompson's face drained of color as he looked from Jordan to Marcus, his mouth slightly agape. The man they had all dismissed, the man they had ignored and judged based on his appearance, was none other than the CEO, the one who had built this empire from the ground up. A few employees tried to hide their embarrassment, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. The contrast between their treatment of Marcus and Jordan's respectful greeting was too glaring to ignore. They had failed the most important test they would ever face. In that moment, Marcus knew exactly what was coming next, and he wasn't going to make it easy for them. Marcus stood tall, his gaze unwavering as he looked at the stunned staff. He had seen their reactions, the disbelief and regret in their eyes, but now wasn't the time for sympathy. His voice cut through the tension as he turned to Jordan. "Jordan," Marcus said, his tone commanding, "I need you to take note of the names of everyone involved in this." His eyes flicked over the staff, all of them now uneasy under his scrutiny. "I want their names, and I want them down immediately." Jordan, without hesitation, pulled out his phone, making the necessary notes. Marcus then turned his focus back to David Thompson, the older salesman who had shown nothing but disdain for him. "David," Marcus continued, How do you decide who is worthy of service here? What makes someone deserving of your attention? David swallowed hard, his mouth opening and closing as he searched for an answer. But none came. The weight of his actions hung in the air, and Marcus could see him faltering. "You didn't ask about my background. You didn't inquire about why I was here," Marcus pressed. "You made assumptions based on how I look. That's not how things should work." His voice remained calm, but there was no mistaking the force behind his words. Marcus paused for a moment, allowing the room to sink in. "I've had enough. All of you who were involved in this will be fired immediately." The words hung in the air like a hammer striking stone. David's face turned pale as he opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. His eyes darted nervously between Marcus and the other employees, but it was clear. The damage had already been done. Jordan, with a nod, took charge. "Effective immediately, everyone involved in this incident is dismissed." The staff froze, looking at each other in disbelief. Their smug confidence was gone, replaced with the stark realization that their behavior had just cost them their jobs. David, the ringleader of the discrimination, stammered, trying to salvage the moment, but his attempts fell flat. Marcus didn't react. He simply turned away, letting the gravity of his decision settle in. The room grew silent as the dismissed staff gathered their things, the sting of their failure hanging heavily in the air. Marcus stood silently for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. The room was still, the silence heavy as the fired staff shuffled out, their faces a mixture of disbelief and regret. Marcus had delivered the consequence, but now it was time to leave them with something far more important, a lesson. He turned back to Jordan, who was standing by the door, observing the aftermath. Marcus cleared his throat, then faced the remaining employees, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Let me make one thing clear," he began, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Respect is not something you give to those you think are important, those who look the part. Respect is something you give to everyone, regardless of what they wear, how they speak, or how much money they have." He let his words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "If you could treat me this way just because of how I look, then I know you've treated countless others the same. People who came in here thinking they would receive the same respect, only to be dismissed because they didn't fit your narrow idea of worthy." Marcus paused, his eyes scanning the room. "But fairness and respect," he said, his voice firm, "don't cost anything. They don't require expensive suits or flashy cars. They have immeasurable value, though. It's the foundation of a business that grows and thrives, and it's the reason people come back. When you treat people with dignity, no matter who they are or how they look, you build trust." The room was silent, each word Marcus spoke carving a lasting impression on the staff who had witnessed the chaos unfold. They couldn't deny the truth in what he said. Respect wasn't about appearances. It was about fairness, about treating others with the same dignity you would expect in return. Marcus took a slow breath before offering one final thought, his tone softer but no less powerful. "In business, just as in life, no one should be judged by their appearance. How you treat someone today will determine how they remember you tomorrow." With that, Marcus turned toward the door, his lesson fully delivered. As he stepped outside into the cool air, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had done what needed to be done, not out of revenge, but to ensure that respect and fairness were always at the forefront of his company's values. He had reminded them all that no one, no matter their status, should ever be treated as less than they deserve.